This is the Batman series we desperately needed, and not only is Batman back in a brand new series written by Matt Fraction and illustrated by the great Jorge Jimenez, but it seems like DC Comics as a whole is on a major uptrend, and I'm all the way for it. Honestly, with the recent success of the Absolute Universe, we are seeing DC starting to take kind of a new shift towards their new comic book releases. You can kind of tell that the DC Absolute Universe kind of resurged new ideas for DC, gave them a new foundation for how they're going to continue their storytelling going forward. We have a lot of brand new series out right now, and other than the infamous whole Red Hood debacle, pretty much everything that's being released is all great, and it's really cool to see. I mean, to be fair, Batman has always had pretty consistent runs. It's rare that we get a Batman run that isn't really that good. So we're seeing them continue that going with this new tradition here with Matt Fraction. And I've been really interested in this brand new take. So I'm glad that it's finally here and we're able to discuss it. Now, if you didn't know, this new series is a reset of the status quo. It's pretty much a great jumping on point for any new readers that want to get into Batman or anybody that just hasn't really been consistent with reading Batman comics. So this is going to be a brand new issue one. So a lot of things that happened in the past, of course, are still canon to the storyline, but this is still, like I said, a great jumping on point. So that way you can kind of get an idea on what happened in the past when that's reintroduced or spoken about, but also just know that there's going to be a lot of new stories going forward. So you won't really feel lost. As long as you have a general idea of who Batman is, essentially, then you'll be just fine getting right into this new series. And the first thing that pops off when you get into this series has to be the art. I mean, Jorge Jimenez is a legend when it comes to comic art at this point. You can tell he takes very good consideration into how the coloring is going to be put. And the one thing I loved about this first issue is just how the color blue stands out so much. Blue has always been a color that's been associated with Batman to a certain degree, but the shade of blue that they use in particular, I don't know if it's just me, but it really stands out. And this is honestly one of my favorite Batman designs, probably ever. I want to say in a long time, but I'm just looking back and I've not always been a fan of the more blue and gray comic book costume for Batman. But I will say this one in particular is really, really good. And I hope we keep this costume going forward. I honestly find new ways to implement this into other Batman media. Another thing I like about the Batsuit is it's kind of a perfect blend of the blue colors, but with a more modern look. So it looks really nostalgic, yet kind of brand new. And I think they found the perfect combination of how to have this done. We also see that he has some new gadgets that he uses throughout the first issue. And I love how they give us detailed explanations on what these gadgets are called, but also giving us like kind of the technology used to create it. So it kind of adds more to the mythos and makes everything seem more realistic, even though it's Batman and it's a comic and everything is so large on a grand scale of things. Now, this story is only the first issue, so of course it's all pretty much build up or set up for how things is going to go forward. But this story that we get in this first issue is really simple, yet it's super endearing, but I'll get to that point later in a bit. Because at first, I want to talk about what the actual premise is. So the premise is essentially Batman versus Killer Croc. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm not really a big Killer Croc fan. I've never really found any storylines that kind of really compelled me. I think the most enjoyment I've really gotten out of that character is probably from Batman Arkham Asylum. I mean, besides that, I'm not really into any of his comic book stories or really like any animated films that feature this character. But Killer Croc is a very iconic character in the Batman's Rogue Gallery. And I do love seeing him whenever he pops up. So in this, Killer Croc is actually in a facility going through treatment as usual. But the only thing is, he's acting more erratic than normal, and he eventually escapes. So of course, Batman has to step in since this is pretty much way out of the police department's depth. And Batman is kind of tracking down and investigating where Killer Croc is going while trying to stop as much damage on the way there as possible. But in this issue, you also get to see Jim Gordon back and actually happy for once. Within the last couple of Batman series, or kind of pretty much in the last decade of Jim Gordon's existence, he's been somewhat a police officer, somewhat a private investigator, but more often than not, he's been super duper depressed. Like he's been super sad. I honestly start to lose kind of like happiness for him just reading his storylines. It's kind of sucked how he's been going through so much, and it doesn't really make it any better that he's kind of been not really a main focal point in a lot of Batman stories of late. So he's always kind of been on the back burner. And every time we do see the character, he's always going through something traumatic. So it's really cool to see he's now back in the police department, but he's not a commissioner. I mean, he's not even a high ranking officer. He's just a normal beat cop just on the streets going through his daily routine. But it's really cool to see someone with his seniority kind of step down to this point. And Jim kind of did his thing as a private investigator, but now he's coming back into the police fold and he's doing his thing as a cop again. So I love seeing that. But in Batman's Pursuit, we also get to see Commissioner Vandal Savage is still up to no good. It's still kind of crazy to me that someone like Vandal Savage is able to become a police commissioner. But honestly, in the world of DC, it's no surprise that a supervillain is able to rise up in the ranks in the government. I mean, if we're being honest, I can see that happening in real life too, but we're not going to get into that part. So it's not really too surprising that it happened, but it's just kind of funny that this guy, Vandal Savage, is plotting up a way to kind of fight back against the crime in Gotham by hiring, private military and this elite task force that's not only going to go after criminals like major supervillains, but also eventually, of course, probably go after Batman and give him some trouble later down the line. But we also see another character return to some degree. Alfred is back in this series to a certain capacity. He's not actually there. He's an AI guide for Batman. And if you didn't know, Alfred actually died in Batman comics back during the City of Bane storyline, which was around 2019, I believe. So Alfred's been gone for quite some time, actually. And when it actually happened back then, there was a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people were really upset that he died, and a lot of people were angry. Me, I was kind of in the middle. I was not really upset that Alfred died. I just wasn't really a fan of the way that he died and the things that happened afterward. But I will say within the last 3 to 4 years, they've kind of done a lot with making that death of him more impactful. And on paper, we knew about this idea of an AI Alfred coming up, and I was really not a fan of hearing it. I thought that it kind of took away from who Alfred was as a character and kind of just shoehorned him back into the story. And it didn't really seem like something Batman would actually be all for. And I'm not going to lie, when I read this first issue, I forgot about that AI Alfred until I actually read it. However, I will say I'm for it. I think because the story itself is in a different tone, but it's also really good in this first issue. If it was a lesser story and done by a lesser writer, maybe I might have had some issues with it or a bit more concerned. But honestly, reading it is not as bad as you might think. So I definitely think it's going to be something that people are going to have to get adjusted to. And it really depends on how will they actually write this version of Alfred into the story going forward. But I think we can get an interesting situation here. A lot of people have been comparing it to like Jarvis and Iron Man. I don't know if I would go that far because Iron Man and Jarvis aren't really as iconic as a duo outside of the suit as Batman and Alfred were. But we'll see how it goes going forward. But I kind of hinted towards this earlier in the video, but the best part of this first issue is when Batman actually confronts Killer Croc. At first, you'll think it'd be a traditional fight. I mean, Batman even kind of suits up, and Batman even pulls off these cool kind of like shot gloves that kind of remind me of the ones from Batman Arkham Origins, so he can kind of take the fight to Killer Croc. But Batman, once he gets to the fight, realizes Croc doesn't want to face him. Croc looks over and just kind of sits down and tells Batman, I don't want to fight. And Batman begins to understand immediately that Croc's mental state has deteriorated to the point he is kind of like a child. He's barely able to form full sentences, and when he does, everything sounds so playful or kind of innocent. And Batman not only decides, you know what, I'm not going to fight Waylon Jones, but he does something I honestly didn't expect Batman to do at all. He takes off his mask and begins to show compassion and sits down next to Waylon and just asks him, how are you feeling? What's going on in your mental space? And why did you come here? Why did you run away from a place that you checked yourself into for rehabilitation, but escape from and come here to this zoo and sit down in front of this dinosaur exhibit? And Croc kind of compares himself to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, telling Batman that he feels just like this T-Rex, not because he physically has mutated, but because he feels like a monster. He feels like he has this uncontrollable hunger that he wants to satisfy, but he's not sure how to do so without harming other people. And Batman starts to realize that this isn't the same Killer Croc that he's faced all these years. And he even changes his tone and his dialogue. And instead of calling him Killer Croc, and from this point forward, he begins to call him by his name, Waylon Jones. And Batman sits down and tells him he understands what he's going through. He knows what it's like to be all alone, and he also knows what it's like to feel like a monster, to feel like you're bottling up your true feelings and you have this rage or this uncontrollable hunger that you want to satisfy. But if you succumb to it, it could be a detriment to you going forward. And I love that story from Batman. And it's really cool to see him sit down and talk to Killer Croc face to face and get some understanding between the two before the authorities arrive. And eventually, Wayland commits himself back into rehabilitation, and the issue ends with Batman actually solving a case without violence. And instead of just actually beating up Killer Croc, they just have a conversation. And I love that about Batman because when you really think about it, Batman overanalyzes everything, but he also always takes an approach of violence. So we got to see him, someone that is intelligent as he is, sit down and say, you know what? I'm going to try a different approach. I see that he's not the same person he was before. I don't have to be the same person myself in order to confront this man. At the end of the day, I just want the city of Gotham to be safe, but I also want to save him. That's why Batman doesn't kill. Not only because of, the idea that he believes he won't be able to stop himself, but also because deep down, he believes everyone deserves another chance and that everyone has the potential to change. And if Killer Croc does change from this point forward, then this could prove Bruce is right. Even if only temporarily, Killer Croc is going to become a better person. And I think that's a really great thing, not for just him, but for Batman and his ideals as well. And seeing AI Alfred also comment on this is really cool. And I think it kind of adds on to their dynamic and Batman's legacy going forward. And to end the issue off, we also get our first look at the new Robin in the series, who's, of course, Tim Drake, making his return back to the spotlight, which I'm really happy for. Tim Drake has always kind of been like one of the black sheep members of the Bat family, even though he's super popular to a certain degree. And he is a Robin, so of course he has his own type of fan base. But at the end of the day, he's always the last Robin you think about. Whenever there's any rankings or there's like any polls, Tim Drake is always towards the bottom. And it's really sad to see because he's been Robin for a really long time. And he was the third Robin. And he actually chose to become Robin and sought it out versus Batman confronting him about it. So I think that it's definitely cool to see him back in the spotlight. Personally, I think he should have been his own hero by now. But if anybody's going to come back to be Batman's sidekick, who else better than him, right? But overall, I think this is a phenomenal first issue, and I'm definitely going to make this a monthly read for me. If the rest of this series progressively gets better, we could be looking at another legendary Batman run, and I'm definitely all for it. So comment down below, what would you like to see in this new Batman story? Honestly, do you guys like the new Batsuit? Because I'm loving it. If not, then what is your ideal Batsuit? But it's Keith here, giving you my thoughts and opinions on everything there is to know about comics. And as always, thanks for watching.